Hey everybody, welcome back to Movies You Missed Podcast, episode 98. We are 2 away from 100. Very exciting stuff. V, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Still riding high from our medieval episode last week. Had a lot of fun with that.
Oh yeah.
And very much looking forward to our very special 100th episode coming up in a couple weeks.
I'm very excited as well. Should be a good time. But before we do that, for those of you that are new here to Movies You Missed Podcast, we are 98 episodes in. That's technically 98 weeks. Welcome. We are two film industry veterans that spent 20 plus years in the entertainment industry. We are here to discuss movies that flew under the radar, movies we love, and movies that a lot of people might have forgotten and that need to be revisited. We also don't spoil a single movie here at Movies You Missed Podcast, which we have been holding strong for 98 episodes, and we will continue for the next 98 as well.
That's right, John. No spoilers here.
None whatsoever. But before we jump into this week's Forces of Nature episode, we do like to discuss the movies that we've seen in theaters or on streaming this week. Luckily, V and I have been hanging out over the last several days, and we did watch a theatrical film that is nominated for Best Picture and 2 Best Picture nominees on streaming. I'll just take it away. V and I went to see the new, written and directed by Jonathan Glazer film, The Zone of Interest.
I really wish we had watched this together before our 2023 recap episode because it would have been one of my top 3 or 4 films of the year, I think.
I was a little worried where you were going with the beginning of that sentence, but yes, I completely agree. This would have absolutely been on the top 5 of 2023. Zone of Interest is an absolute necessity for every human being on the planet, especially those that are on the spectrum of the Holocaust did not exist. This movie, wow. Holy shit. I don't even... if you've seen the reel on Instagram, you could see the upbeat energy that both V and I had going into this movie and how completely floored our energy left us for the finale of the reel. This movie, if you've seen Schindler's List, it should be Schindler's List and then The Zone of Interest in your U.S. history or world history class of any high school or college throughout the entirety of this planet that we live on right now.
Absolutely.
Heartbreaking, eye-opening, jaw-dropping, and it's not even like Schindler's List where it's graphically violent. It is just so infuriating.
And gut
Absolutely
punching.
Gut-punching. See The Zone of Interest. Not only because of the fact that it is a Best Picture nominee, but please watch this movie. We left completely speechless. I don't know how we were actually able to articulate anything for the reel after leaving the theater for this movie, but my God, what a masterpiece of World War II cinema.
I definitely couldn't have said it better myself. I'm still pretty much speechless.
Yeah, it has been haunting me since we saw it. I've read up on the trivia. I've read up on Jonathan Glazer's process. I've read up on the actuality of what went on during the moments of this movie that actually did take place during World War II up against the backdrop of Auschwitz. I've been to Dachau in Germany. I don't know if any of our other listeners have been to any other concentration camps, but my God, this movie, absolutely 10 out of 10.
That's the number I'd give it.
There you go. And after that, V and I decided to stream one of the other Best Picture nominees. Actually, we watched 3 Best Picture nominees together this week. The second one that we decided to check out was Celine's song, written and directed by, starring Greta Lee, Past Lives. V, what did you think of Past Lives?
Well, we certainly felt a lot different about this movie than we did about Zone of Interest, I can put it that way.
I will fully agree with you there.
It was actually a bit disappointing. It was a beautiful movie. We both turned to each other and said, wow, we really like the cinematography. The acting was pretty good, but overall, it just didn't really impact us at all. It was a bit disappointing just given the hype of not only it being up for Best Director, but a lot of people saying that Greta Lee should have been nominated for Best Actress. And overall, after watching the movie, our expectations weren't really met.
No, cinematography was amazing. I liked the story. In a way, V, you and I kind of can relate to the characters in this movie because there were several 5 to 10 year gaps where you and I actually did not ever really, communicate. However,
yeah, because you would piss me off. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. No, but overall, this was really just like a meh. It was fine. It was good, but Best Picture nominee?
Right?
Absolutely not. No. Even the original screenplay? For what? Like, come on. I don't know.
Not being cliche, I guess.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Yeah, I would say this is one of the lower tier Best Picture nominees for the 2024 Oscars that are coming up.
Completely agree.
Yeah, disappointing, but at the same time, there were good moments. Again, beautiful cinematography, great soundtrack. The acting was good, but overall, it was one of those movies where you were just kind of like, yeah. And V, what did we watch to end our Best Picture nominee watches over the last few days?
The movie that rounds out my top 5 of 2023 now. Zone of Interest and this movie have been added to that list, and now I think I've rearranged actually the order of that list. We watched American Fiction. John did me a solid and watched it for a second time because he had seen it in theaters a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It is one of my favorite movies of the year.
It is so fucking good, and the second time around completely revitalized my opinion about it as definitely one of the funniest of 2023. Jeffrey Wright was so fantastic. Everybody in the movie, supporting characters, etc., just wonderful. Not only was it great for me a second time and to experience it with UV and my wife, but yeah, it is definitely one of the best movies of 2023.
If Oppenheimer hadn't come out in 2023, I would be arguing either Zone of Interest or American Fiction should be winning Best Picture.
Oh, I will completely agree with you. I feel like if Oppenheimer did not get released in 2023, Zone of Interest would take it. Jeffrey Wright would win Best Actor. This would win Best Adapted Screenplay. I feel like American Fiction has a lot of clout and a lot of pull. However, Oppenheimer is
a 2023 movie.
The 2023 movie. So yeah.
Exactly.
But if anybody takes it for American Fiction, completely deserved.
I agree, and similar to the Zone of Interest, I think it's a very important movie for all of us to watch.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There were so many moments that I noticed during the first viewing, but the second viewing, especially watching with you and my wife, was kind of like, wow. Like, there were moments like, shit, maybe I didn't actually take that as to heart as I should have the first time around, but definitely a great movie and a wonderful human piece as well.
Agreed.
Sweet. And like I said before, this episode is about the forces of nature. I'm really excited about this movie because we have some pretty bitchin' disaster flicks to discuss today. V, I believe you start us off with a movie from not too long ago.
That's right, though it has some pretty significant parallels to the movie that you picked that came out 20 years before it.
Hell yeah.
But we'll get into that a little bit later in our episode. And before that, I will discuss my pick from 2015, as you said. It's a little more recent. This stars a whole bunch of actors who we have spoken about in passing, but actually haven't done a movie with them in it yet. So I'm very excited to get into the cast of this movie specifically.
Absolutely.
But as you returning listeners know, we discuss the plot first. And hey, why don't I mention the title as well?
Hey, that might be a good idea.
I picked 2015's San Andreas.
California dreaming.
Sia's rendition of that at the end credits is so good.
I loved it in the trailer when I first saw the trailer, too.
Same, yeah. That trailer was pretty
awesome.
badass. Yeah.
It was a great trailer, and thankfully the movie was just as awesome.
Which doesn't happen very much these days, actually.
Especially with disaster movies.
Yes, for a movie in quite some time.
I think this might
be yeah, I agree.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we have had Godzilla. We did have Godzilla -1, but those aren't necessarily quote-unquote disaster movies. Those are monster movies.
No, it's a monster movie, yeah. I think
this
was the last one,
right?
The
last one, yeah. The monsters of nature coming at us.
And of course, as two California natives, this is near and dear to our heart because this is about earthquakes.
Hell yeah.
The San Andreas Fault? Or should we be saying hella since it's a California
No, I'm not from Northern California. That is a Northern California thing only. The first time I ever heard hella, I wanted to slap the guy that said it because he was from Northern California. And, we all know Southern California is the better part of California.
Okay, well, that part's not true. However, I will agree that when I moved from Northern California to Southern California when I was 18...
See, it was the better side.
every Southern Californian looked at me like it was so obvious I was from Northern California and that they wanted to slap the shit out of me anytime I said hella. So that was quickly filtered out of my vocabulary when I moved down to Southern California.
Well, there you go. We always made fun of the guy. His name was Saul in high school. He'd always be like, "Oh, that's hella crazy. That's hella awesome." We're like, shut the fuck up. No.
Well, and now that we're on TikTok, we got to get into the Gen Z vocabulary of
do we?
Riz and cringe, and I've been learning them. It's cool. I'm keeping up.
Have you? Oh, wow. Okay. I know a lot of people like the word cringe these days, and I don't use it, but hey, maybe one day I will.
I like the term basic.
Yeah. I don't use that one either.
See, folks, this is why we're on Twitter and Instagram more than TikTok. Follow us there instead. Anyway,
moving on.
To San Andreas. This stars a whole host of great actors, like I said, that we are big fans of. But before I get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the plot. San Andreas follows a man named Ray Gaines. He is an LAFD search and rescue helicopter pilot. Probably the most Americana character I've described on this show so far in 98 episodes.
Yeah, definitely.
And he is played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah.
This movie opens up with a pretty spectacular rescue.
Yes.
And it's a great PSA for don't text and drive.
Absolutely.
This poor young girl drives off a cliff and gets stuck in a big canyon because she was texting and driving. And her car is on the brink of falling into a deep crevasse. And before it does that, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's going to swoop in with his helicopter and his crew and go save her. And that's exactly what he does. And this is actually a pretty spectacular opening scene, especially because The Rock actually did this stunt. He rappelled out of a helicopter.
Yes.
So this is a great introduction to our protagonist, our hero of this movie. And then we get introduced to Dr. Lawrence Hayes, played by one of our all-time favorites,
Paul Giamatti.
That's right.
Another driving force for me to see this movie. I remember being like, oh, The Rock's... This was when I think he was still The Rock, kind of trying to get away from The Rock, but in the trailer it was like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and then I saw Giamatti in the trailer, I'm like, oh, done. How can you not go see Giamatti in a disaster movie? Fuck yeah.
I felt the same way about him and Carla Gugino being in this movie. They totally sold me.
Yeah, she showed up and I was like, okay, Sin City Love coming back. I love it.
Yes, me too. And Dr. Lawrence Hayes works at Caltech. He is actually a seismologist, an earthquake scientist.
He's an earthquake scientist.
And he's trying to develop an early warning detection system for earthquakes, he and his partner. And they go out to the Hoover Dam. Have you ever been to the Hoover Dam?
I have, actually.
I was there.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I really like the history of it. And it was...
Oh, hey, hold on, VV. Is this a goddamn...
That's exactly what I was going to say. Damn it.
Oh, darn. Sorry.
No, that was perfect. That's from Beavis and Butthead. And it's the dam outside of Las Vegas, and they're running a bunch of tests because there have been some small quakes out there. And so they really want to just test out this early detection system that they've been developing to see if it actually works. The good news is that it works. The bad news is that there's a really big earthquake, and unfortunately his partner dies during this event. However, with this new detection system, he goes back to Caltech and realizes not only has this massive earthquake outside of Las Vegas triggered a bunch of smaller ones on the way back to LA, but that it's also connected to the San Andreas Fault.
Indeed.
And what Dr. Lawrence Hayes tells us, not only the audience, but everyone who will listen to him, including everyone when he gets on the news, is that this has been just the beginning of what's to come. And a massive earthquake is not only heading towards Los Angeles, but also San Francisco. Most people listen, but because it's such new science, not everyone does it first. And so the LA Fire Department sends Ray out to the Las Vegas area to help with a search and rescue. This is before any earthquakes start happening in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles is his soon-to-be ex-wife, Emma, played by Carla Gugino. We're introduced to her a little bit earlier in the film because Ray goes to pick up their daughter at her house where she's with her new boyfriend. And so we get apprised of the whole family situation during this time. Ray goes to pick up their daughter, Blake, to go to Seattle to drop her off at college. And unfortunately, because of the earthquake outside of Las Vegas, those plans have been derailed. But it's this nice exposition piece that shows us that he and Emma have separated, that she has a new boyfriend, but they're still co-parenting their daughter, Blake, together.
Right.
And they have a good enough relationship that when this earthquake hits and Emma is out to lunch, funny enough, with her boyfriend's sister.
Yeah.
Who, did you catch who that played his sister?
I recognized her, but I could not place her. So I'm sure when you tell me who it is, I'm going to be like, well, son of a gun.
It was Kylie Minogue.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
No.
Was that seriously Kylie Minogue?
It was, and I'll tell you why she was in this film when I talk about the trivia. But yeah, it was totally random.
Wow, she looked so different from when she was the Green Fairy.
Blonde hair will do it.
Yeah, Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, she was much lighter in complexion. Well, she wasn't green anymore in San Andreas. But yeah, she did look a lot different in this movie. But it is Kylie Minogue, which is kind of cool.
That is pretty cool. I like Kylie Minogue.
Me too.
I can't get her out of my head.
Nicely done. And when this earthquake is happening, they are unfortunately in a tall building having lunch at a very nice restaurant. And she calls Ray because, of course, she's going to call him. They have a great relationship still. And he's the search and rescue fire department guy. Of course, that's the first person you should call.
Hell yeah.
And he tells her, "Get to the roof. I'm coming to get you." And he's in his helicopter, and he literally flies to the roof of that building and saves her life, which is so awesome.
It is pretty badass. That whole sequence is so fucking cool.
This movie is full of him commandeering vehicles that he needs to get to his family, which I fully support during an emergency.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. And I love when he's flying over Hollywood and there's that long shot from Griffith Park to downtown and it looks like just a wave of earthquake.
That's such a cool effect.
So badass.
That's actually one of my favorite special effects shots of the movie.
Yeah, likewise. And then, because then they zoom in on downtown and the buildings are like rocking back and forth.
Yeah.
And then that's when we get the oh my God moment from Dwayne Johnson. And it's like, oh my God. And you're like, wow, like this movie is nuts. And even before that, like you mentioned before, the Hoover Dam sequence is just so epic and so brutal for a PG-13 movie.
That's a really good point. And I think one of the reasons this movie works so well is because of all the great visual effects shots. It's a fully believable disaster movie.
Absolutely.
So now that Emma is saved and she's in the helicopter with Ray, he actually gets a phone call from their daughter Blake, who had traveled to San Francisco with Emma's boyfriend. The earthquake has actually hit up there as well, because this whole entire series of earthquakes is moving up the coast and up California from LA to San Francisco. And Ray and Emma turn to each other and say, "Let's go get our daughter." And so the rest of the movie is Ray and Emma going up the state of California, up to San Francisco, trying to save their daughter, cut with their daughter Blake, trying to stay safe while waiting for her parents.
Right.
I really love a lot of the backstory of this movie, too. It turns out that Ray and Emma only got divorced, or are in the middle of getting divorced, as I should say, because their other daughter, Mallory, had drowned.
Right.
And Ray, of course, being in search and rescue, couldn't ever get over it.
Yeah.
And divorce is actually prominent in both our movies, which is kind of funny.
That is interesting. When I was watching mine, I was like, well, there's some more parallels here.
Yeah, exactly. And we learn more about this couple and actually this family as a whole, including Blake. And so not only do you really care about these people and you really want Blake to be saved, all of the action sequences and all the disaster sequences are so cool. And I think they're amplified because you and I recognize all of the locations in this movie.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And speaking of earthquakes, I believe you lived up north during the 1994 Northridge earthquake, right?
I did, because I was just a little kid, and I was too young for the 89 earthquake in San Francisco, so I've kind of missed the two big ones in California over the last 50 years. Yeah.
Crazy. I will never forget the 1994 Northridge earthquake. I was living in Palmdale and was spending the night at a friend of mine's house, oddly enough, and the house started shaking, and I thought it was a train going by, honestly. Like, the whole house was like, kind of like this movie, just completely rumbling, almost falling apart. We ran out into the middle of the street, and then I think it lasted maybe 5 minutes. Like, it was a big one. I want to say it was in the 6 or 7. But the 5 freeway was destroyed. Mm-hmm. Northridge was completely leveled. Like, I mean, it was a son of a bitch. And the aftershocks after that, they sucked. But I did get back to my parents' house later that morning, but there was no power. You couldn't call anybody. All the power was out. You know, everybody was in the middle of the street just like, oh my God! Like, just going absolutely insane. So if you are a listener from Southern California, what was your 1994 earthquake experience like? Because I'm curious. Because I was at a friend's house. I'll never forget
Your
it.
Poor parents, of course. The one night you're at a friend's house is when there's a massive earthquake. And
absolutely.
And funny enough, Carla Gugino was actually in the Northridge earthquake in 1994
Whoa.
because she was an actress and she
Oh,
was living
snap.
in LA at the time. And the Northridge earthquake is actually the reason she will always sleep with clothes on now.
Oh, is that right?
Because she was living in Pacific Palisades at the time, and when the Northridge earthquake hit, she was sleeping naked and she couldn't find her clothes and everybody was trying to evacuate and she had to run out of the house. And she said in an interview since then, she always sleeps with clothes on because of the Northridge earthquake.
Oh, you Northridge earthquake bastard.
Yeah, curse you.
That is incredible. That's wild.
Yeah.
That was a crazy-ass quake for sure.
But in this movie, it's a 9.6 quake that ends up hitting San Francisco. And that's my only gripe about this movie, is that Paul Giamatti says this is the biggest quake in recorded history. But when it does hit San Francisco, after there's already been a ton of destruction because there's been aftershocks from the LA quake and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when the 9.6 one hits, it's not as monumental as I'd like it to be. The quake doesn't go on for that long. There's about the same amount of destruction as the earlier quakes earlier in the day. And so it's not this delineating event that's like, oh yeah, that was the biggest one. You could tell, you know. And that's my only gripe about this movie.
Interesting. All right, I get you. I can empathize with that and get behind you on that one.
But the rest of this movie is great. I actually really love disaster movies, so it was really fun to have this on the podcast and have a chance to discuss it. And again, especially because the cast is so great.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. I watched this trailer at the production office of the horrendous production company, The Asylum, that produced the Sharknado movies and a whole bunch of other god-awful movies. I was doing a mockumentary, actually, about the Sharknado movies. Watched this trailer, and then about a month and a half later, I was hired on as the second assistant director on San Andreas Quake, the Asylum's version of San Andreas.
Oh, bummer.
Oh, yeah. That was a horrible movie. I'm in the movie, but it's not good. And of course, you know, had to make that movie right around the time that San Andreas was coming out because that's just how the Sci-Fi Channel worked.
Of course.
But, I thought it was pretty funny. And the really heartbreaker of this movie, San Andreas, is I never saw it in theaters.
I didn't either, and I was super bummed about it too after I finally watched it. I was like, damn it!
Oh yeah, I saw it at home in my small studio apartment on like my flat 42-inch HD TV because 4K wasn't a thing yet, and I have the 4K copy of it now. So I actually watched it about 6 months ago, and Amy did the same thing. She goes, "Didn't you just watch it?" I'm like, "Sure did," but I'm gonna watch it again.
Doesn't matter.
And, yeah, no, it's a bitchin' flick, and I don't necessarily get like too into a lot of the characters because it is a disaster movie, but there's one moment where I actually got choked up this time where an old couple holds each other like right before they're like swept away.
Yeah, and a big tsunami.
Yeah. But overall, like, you know, it's Dwayne Johnson. I'm a fan of his except for Skyscraper. Like, I love Rampage, Baywatch. Not that that's a disaster movie, but I never did see The Rundown, but I am a big fan of Walking Tall, which is going to be on this podcast at some point soon.
Yes, I learned that about you actually just within the last year that you're a big fan of Walking Tall. I didn't know that beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
But I've been a big fan of Dwayne Johnson's for quite some time, and his career has taken this very interesting arc because he started out doing WWE stuff and pretty crappy movies. I mean, he was in The Mummy Returns. That's the first acting I'd ever seen him in. I've never actually followed wrestling, so I never saw him there. But he's in The Mummy Returns, and then he's in the kind of spin-off movie to that, The Scorpion King, which was awful.
I will never forget seeing that movie in theaters and being like, The Rock sucks. Like,
he wasn't a good actor in the beginning of his career, that's true.
No,
but
he was not.
He worked really hard to get better. I actually do think he's he's pretty solid.
Oh, no, he's
solid now, yeah.
He is solid.
He's solid, yes, that's true. And he made a bunch of really crappy movies like The Tooth Fairy and stuff in the very beginning of his career.
Oh, that's right.
As everyone has to, I get it. But then all of a sudden, he started picking some really good films. The Rundown with Seann William Scott is very good. I highly recommend it.
I've heard. I got to check that one out. That's been on my to-watch list since it came out.
Walking Tall, I agree with you, is very good. I've always really liked it.
Yes, so good.
And Ashley Scott's in it, who you've worked with.
Indeed she is. She is a sweetheart.
And then he goes on and is in Get Smart with Anne Hathaway and Steve Carell, and he's really good in it.
I guess I'm like the only person that I know that did not like that movie.
You are the only person that I know who didn't like that movie.
I guess I got to revisit it. I should do that because I really did not like that movie at all.
Okay, but he's also in The Other Guys.
Oh, I love The Other Guys. That's one of the very few Will Ferrell comedies that I really like.
Because he plays a straight man.
Yes, he's great.
I can't wait to do that movie because
you stole it from me, damn it.
I did, but I think that makes us even.
It does.
He, of course, is in the Fast and Furious franchise, and the first time he appears is actually in my favorite Fast and Furious movie, Fast 5.
That's right, I remember.
He's in a movie called Snitch, which is actually pretty good, and it has Susan Sarandon in it.
Oh, yeah, I never saw that one.
I loved him in Central Intelligence with Kevin Hart.
Never saw it because Kevin Hart's in it.
Fair. I'm not a big fan of Kevin Hart, but it was very funny. He voices Maui in the movie Moana, which instead of a series, now there's going to be a full-fledged movie.
Sequel. Yeah.
But it's not live action anymore. It's now fully
I know, it's so
animated,
strange.
and it seems like it's all kind of being thrown together rather quickly, and it's making me nervous.
Oh, definitely. I do like him as Maui, though. He can sing. He's got a voice on him.
He's great. I loved his song in that movie. As you said, he's in Baywatch. I love that film. We're watching it this weekend, I think.
Oh, we can if you want. I love that movie. Efron cracks me the fuck up in that movie.
So funny. He's in the remake of Jumanji, which the first one is awesome. The first remake, I should say. I love Skyscraper. I know you hate it. I don't care. But that also is interesting because you like Rampage, and I don't like that movie.
Oh, Rampage is so awesome. Maybe you didn't play the video game growing up?
I did not.
Okay, but it doesn't really follow the video game as closely as most video game adaptation movies do. But I thought it was I loved it. I saw it in theaters. I have the Blu-ray. I've watched it a lot. I like it.
I've only seen it once and I didn't like it when I watched it. Maybe I should give it a second chance. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not. I tried to get my sister to watch it, and she texted me. She goes, "I turned that movie off like 20 minutes in. The acting is so terrible." I'm like, "You don't watch Rampage for the acting."
It's got a giant gorilla in it. This is not Oscar-worthy.
It's got a massive gorilla, a flying wolf, and a huge alligator. This is not a movie we're going to watch the acting in. And Malin Akerman's in it, and she sucks in it, but at the same time, it's still a good movie. Same director as San Andreas.
That is the same director as San Andreas. You're right. And that's a good time to mention how Dwayne always has really hot wives.
Oh, hell yeah, he does.
Because he has Carla Gugino in this movie. He had Neve Campbell as his wife in Skyscraper. Malin Ackerman, he always has really awesome, gorgeous co-stars that I'm very envious for.
Yeah, for sure.
But then after Ballers, his career has taken a bit of a dive. He did Jungle Cruise, Red Notice, and Black Adam. Red Notice, it was pretty popular, but it's not a great film. And now he's back to WWE, and he's had, like I said, he had this interesting arc in his career where he built himself up from pretty crappy movies in WWE to being in really good, really successful, a very bankable star. And unfortunately, his star's kind of faded recently. And in the last 2 years, he's really lost a lot of popularity. So I'm not sure how the rest of his career is going to span out, but we've been fans of him for quite some time. So I'll still give him a chance.
I liked Ballers, too. I thought that was a great series.
Yeah, you finally got me to start it, which had been on my list for a long time, and I watched the whole thing in a couple weeks, and it was great.
Yeah, very, very good show.
And as I said, Carla Gugino plays Emma, his estranged wife in this movie. I first saw her in Son-in-Law, which is going to be one of my Thanksgiving picks at some point.
That's right, she is in Son-in-Law.
It's a Pauly Shore movie.
Wow.
I love that movie so much. And I watched it last Thanksgiving, and it still holds up.
Oh, that's funny.
She was in a Nicolas Cage movie called Snake Eyes.
Oh, cool. I've never seen that one, but I heard that one's a good one.
I saw it a couple times when I was in high school. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then she's part of the most beautiful couple, I think, in movie history because she's in Spy Kids with Antonio Banderas.
Oh,
and they
really?
were both so hot in those movies. Gorgeous couple, great chemistry. It was in the early 2000s, so I was just graduating high school, so I watched those movies just for the couple and not for the kids.
Oh, all right. Robert Rodriguez.
That's right, and she's in this Jet Li movie called The One, early Jason Statham movie. Delroy Lindo's in it. It's a pretty great guilty pleasure action movie. And then, of course, she's in Sin City.
Yeah, she is.
And she's in this movie called Righteous Kill, which I was actually a script reader on.
Oh.
The production
De Niro and Pacino.
Yeah, the production company that I worked for right out of college as a script reader and then a production assistant, they produced this movie, and it's De Niro and Al Pacino and it was not a good movie.
Yeah, I remember everybody was really disappointed with it.
It was so disappointing, and it wasn't this big name production studio. I'm shocked that they got both of those guys to do it.
That's what I remember hearing. Everyone's like, Righteous Kill, what company is this? Never heard of him. All right, give it a shot. That sucked. I never saw it.
Yeah, it was not good. Which I could have told you because I was a scriptreader on it, and I was like, eh. And then she's in some great shows. She was in Watchmen, Entourage, Fall of the House of Usher.
That's right, she was in Entourage.
She's also been in other movies with The Rock.
Really?
She was in Escape to Witch Mountain.
Oh.
And a movie called Faster.
Oh, I remember Faster.
And this is their third movie together, which is pretty
Very cool.
Yeah. Most recently, if anybody listened to the new movies we saw in theaters this week in last week's episode, she plays the stepmom in Lisa Frankenstein.
Oh, very cool.
She's actually a highlight in that movie.
Nice.
Yeah. And I really loved Carla Gugino in this movie. She plays such a badass in so many movies she's in, and my favorite scene in this entire film of San Andreas is when she makes the phone call to her boyfriend. Favorite part of the whole movie.
Oh, yes. It's a good moment for sure.
Alexandra Daddario plays their daughter Blake, who looks really young for her age because she's only about 15 years younger than the both of them.
No way.
Yeah, she's actually our age.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she just looks great for her age.
Yeah, she does.
She's in the first two Percy Jackson the Olympian movies. Not great movies, but she definitely started making her name for herself in them.
Sweet.
She was in season 1 of True Detective. She's also in Baywatch.
That's right, she is.
And she was in Rampage, but they deleted her scenes.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
And then the supporting cast is awesome. As you said, Paul Giamatti plays Dr. Lawrence Hayes.
Hell yeah.
Some of his credits, I'm not going to talk about all of them because there are several movies that are coming up in the future that he is in that we'd love.
Yes.
So some of the movies that he's been in, first, I always forget that he's the operator in the big control tower in The Truman Show.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
He's in one of my sci-fi guilty pleasures starring Ben Affleck and Uma Thurman called Paycheck.
That's right. Yeah, he is.
Oh, God. I love guilty pleasure sci-fi movies. It's one of my favorite
Paycheck
genres.
is not a bad movie.
Well, yeah. I mean...
I liked it better than Next with...
yeah, that was horrible.
Nicolas Cage. They're kind of like on the same spectrum almost.
True. The Paycheck was way better when you compare that.
Yes.
He plays an inspector in a movie called The Illusionist, which I love, with Edward Norton.
Yes, that movie is so underrated.
Yes. He's in a musical starring Tom Cruise as an aging rocker who sings, and he's really, really good at it. This is Tom Cruise who's singing, who's really good at it.
No shit.
I went to the premiere with a Q&A with the director afterwards. It was so fun. It's ridiculous. It's a musical, but I had a great time with it. It's one of my guilty pleasures. And Paul Giamatti and Catherine Zeta-Jones are in it too.
Wow. And the title of that one is?
Oh, sorry. Rock of Ages.
Rock of Ages. I was going to say Rockstar, but that's the Mark Wahlberg one.
That's right. That is a Mark Wahlberg one. He does not sing in that film, by the way. That's all lip syncing. He plays the friar in the 2013 remake of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, wow. Does he really?
Mm-hmm. And of course, most recently, he has an Oscar-nominated performance in The Holdovers.
Yes, indeed he do.
We'll be talking about him in a couple episodes for our
yes, we will.
Oscar special. Yowan Griffith plays Daniel, Emma's new boyfriend, and he's a very rich developer, a role you'll recognize him for. He is an officer on the Titanic.
Yes, he is.
He's the one who tries to consolidate all the survivors in the lifeboat so he can try to save more people.
That's right, yes.
And he's also in King Arthur.
Yes, he is. He plays Lancelot.
A movie you and I like.
I love the Antoine Fuqua-directed King Arthur. Big time.
Art Parkinson plays Ollie, this little boy that Blake meets while she's trying to survive. He plays one of the Starks in Game of Thrones.
No shit, really?
He's Rickon Stark, the one who has to run across the field in Battle of the Bastards, which is funny because that episode is one we talked about last week.
Whoa.
That Ramsay uses as bait.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's cool.
He's also the voice of Kubo in Kubo and the Two Strings.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Carlton Cuse wrote this screenplay. He created and wrote Briscoe County Jr., a TV series that I loved in the 90s, even though it went for one season. He also created and wrote the show Nash Bridges.
Oh, yeah.
Lost. And he wrote the screenplay to Rampage.
Oh, wow.
He also created the show Lock and Key and Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan.
Oh, very cool.
He's
wow.
a pretty fantastic showrunner.
Yeah, busy guy.
And then, as you said, the director also directed Rampage. His name is Brad Payton. He also directed The Rock and Journey to the Mysterious Island. Because this is a movie about earthquakes, the crew did, in fact, consult with the USC professor. His name is Thomas Jordan, and he's actually the director of the Southern California Earthquake Center. And they really wanted to make sure that the things that happened in this movie were, in fact, plausible. And it is, because a Nevada quake could trigger an LA quake, and an LA quake could trigger a San Francisco quake. So that all is very accurate. But when he was interviewed, Thomas Jordan, this professor, was interviewed about the script after the movie came out, he said, "I gave them free advice, some of which they took, but much of which they didn't."
That's great.
And unfortunately, the devastating earthquake in Nepal happened in April 2015, which was the month before this movie was released. And so the nice thing is that the marketing department actually pivoted all of their campaigns, and they added information about how to help the relief efforts throughout all of their press for San Andreas, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is pretty sweet.
And speaking of Dwayne's acting chops, he actually ad-libbed the line, "It's been a while since I got you to second base," when they land in AT&T Park.
Yes, that part's great.
And so Carlo Gugino's reaction and laugh is sincere.
That is pretty good. I like that.
And not only was some of this film shot in and around California, San Francisco, and LA, as we've discussed. However, a large amount of the film was actually shot in and around Brisbane, Australia.
Really?
Yeah, which I had no idea. I thought it was all California.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
And that's how Kylie Minogue ended up in the movie.
Ah, all right.
So that is San Andreas, one of my favorite disaster movies that came out in 2015. It had a budget of $110 million.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
I thought it was
really
going to be bigger
does.
than that, honestly.
Well, the funny thing is now looking at all these movies that are coming out these days, like Argyle had a $200 million budget. I'm like, where the hell did all that go?
Oh my God. $200?
Yeah.
Wow.
Too much visual effects.
Probably
being used, I guess.
too many moments of visualization of the kitty.
Oh, kitty. Its U.S. box office was $155 million. Its worldwide gross was $475 million. It did incredibly well, which is why there's rumors
Oh, gosh.
of a San Andreas 2 coming out.
Damn.
Which I hope
Oh, you know what? I'll go.
I mean, I would, but I hope they don't.
Yeah, let's hope not. Leave well enough alone.
Yeah, this was a great standalone movie.
Definitely.
And I'm so glad you love this movie as much as I do.
Oh, yeah. Huge fan.
I was so nervous in recommending this film originally when you had picked Twister, and we, of course, finally were like, no, we need to do Twister. We've been talking about it for so much our first season of this show. And I know you're a little bit hit and miss on The Rock, so I was like, maybe San Andreas? And you're like, oh, hell yeah, I have the 4K. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I'm mostly hit with Dwayne Johnson. I just don't like Skyscraper. Like,
okay, fair.
I loved Pain and Gain with him and Mark Wahlberg. I thought that was awesome. And yeah, Walking Tall, big fan. I'll see. And the Fast franchise, I love him in those too, as Hobbs. I'm a big fan.
I guess it's because my most recent memory of him is you and I watching Black Adam together.
Yeah, that could be it. And that just was not
so
good
atrocious.
at all. Yeah, that was no good.
Thankfully, we are a bit more loyal than that. Otherwise, it would have completely spoiled us from The Rock forever.
It really would have. Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Well, thankfully, San Andreas is a much better film.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a perfect time for us to rewind a bit and pivot to another natural disaster and discuss your movie.
I think that's a good idea. We are rewinding 28 years back to the year 1996. 1996 was a great year for cinema, as was the year 1999, 1997, 1995, 1993, 1994. So many great years in the 90s of movies. But
True.
This was definitely a staple for the world and everybody VN Mind's age, over 30, short from 40.
And the first season of our podcast, because we mentioned it a lot that first year.
That's true, we do, and we did mention it a lot, and now we're finally getting to it. So, Shannon, here we go. We're about to get real windy up in this bitch, because we are discussing 1996's, directed by Jean de Bont, written by Michael Crichton, Anne-Marie Martin, starring Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Jamie Gertz, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Carrie Ullis, Lois Smith, Alan Ruck, Todd Field, Jeremy Davis, and a whole handful of other supporting actors. This is Twister. I was going to do a wind effect, but I figured I wouldn't do it, so thank you for doing the wind effect.
We'll see how it comes out in people's ears, though.
Yeah, right? Oddly enough, this was a piece of trivia. This might actually work for this, but this movie had such a high reverberation of bass during its soundtrack that movie theaters worldwide were losing their surround sound systems because of how intense the sound was. So maybe, maybe you have the pipes for it.
Hell yeah, that's what I want to hear from a movie. If you can blow out speakers, you make me happy.
Absolutely. This movie is directed by Jean de Bont. Jean de Bont, we discussed as the director of photography on a Christmas film that V picked. First year we did Christmas movies here. Die Hard.
That's right. Which inspired him to make?
Speed.
That's right.
Yeah. This film was also the very first piece of cinema that was ever put on to the DVD format.
Whoa! Now that's a claim to fame.
Absolutely. But before we get into all the madness of the behind the scenes and all this good stuff with the cast, a little bit about Twister. It's about tornadoes. Moving on!
Yeah, basically.
No, there is a bit of a story in this movie. Michael Crichton and Anne-Marie Martin, they were actually married at the time when they wrote this screenplay. Michael Crichton, for those of you that may not know him by name, I'm sure you do, but he is the writer of the greatest movie. Well, he's the writer of the book that the greatest film is based off of, Jurassic Park.
And Congo.
And Congo. Can't forget Congo. I've read a few Michael Crichton books, and they're pretty wild. I got to read some more, even though he very unfortunately did pass away several years ago. But Twister, let's get into the storyline a little bit about this film from 1996. Twister opens up with a very traumatic event for one of its leading stars, Jo. She's a child, and she witnesses something very intense with an F5 Twister that touches down in her hometown of Oklahoma. I will never forget seeing this movie in theaters for the first time, and the first 5 minutes of this movie completely just blowing me away. And the entire theater, too. And if you've seen Twister, you know what we're talking about. So after all of this trauma and all this madness, we fast forward about 2 decades later, and we meet Bill and his brand new fiancée, Melissa, played by Jamie Gertz, and Bill, played by Bill Paxton.
Actors playing the character with their same name.
Hell yeah. It was very likely very easy on set to get Bill to set because they needed Bill, and Bill is Bill. So we end up finding... So we end up finding out that Bill and Melissa are on their way to meet up with Jo because she's got some divorce papers that Bill is needing to collect. Melissa's not entirely sure that Jo has signed these papers, but Bill is very much like, oh yeah, she signed them, don't worry about it. The reason we're going out here is because of the weather today. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tornadoes, and she's got her whole crew out there, and we... in the exposition of this dialogue, we find out that Bill used to be a storm chaser with Jo. And we find out that Jo has this band of merry men, if you will, that storm chase, and they get grant money to go out and do this. And just like San Andreas, they're trying to predict tornadoes a lot earlier than how the weathermen are, giving the warnings like 2-3 minutes before. They want to try and get warnings of tornadoes out to like 10-15 minutes so people have enough time to get to their storm shelters and all this kind of stuff. It's, because this is the flatland of the United States. I've never personally experienced a tornado. One of these days, I wouldn't mind seeing one. I don't know how close I'd get, but I would actually think it would be pretty awesome to see. And this movie really was one of those awakening moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like nature is fucking nuts, like beyond earthquakes, which 1994 happened 2 years before this movie came out, the Northridge quake that we were just talking about during V's pick. I remember after this movie, I would go to the library at school and like look up tornadoes and storms and all this kind of stuff. And I grew up in Los Angeles. We didn't really get a whole lot of crazy storms. We got a lot of rain, but we didn't get like thunder and lightning and, insane winds and stuff like that. And very, very good. So Bill and Jo start to kind of reconnect a little bit, but only because Bill wants to collect these divorce papers so he can move on with his life and no longer, have to worry about Jo and et cetera, et cetera. They're getting divorced. Do you have the papers? Like, let's do this. And she's like, well, what's the urgency? Are you getting married? He goes, yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, I am getting married. And she goes, oh, well, I kind of thought that maybe you'd come out here on your own because we have Dorothy here. And then we find out that Dorothy was one of Bill's earlier designs on a way that they could get these little sensors up into the funnel of a tornado to send back all this data. And again, this is 1996. So watching this movie and seeing all the laptops and all the computers that they have in the vans and stuff, I'm just like, Jesus Christ. That was like right around the time that internet came out, you know? So the fact that like they have all of this technology is still pretty impressive for 1996. So Joe shows Bill Dorothy, and at one point we find out that tornado is about to touch down about several miles away from where they are. So Joe takes off. Bill is like, oh yeah, you know, this is exactly what they live for. Don't worry, it's pretty cool. And then Melissa's like, so she signed this divorce papers? And he goes, oh my gosh, no, she didn't. And she's like, wait a minute, what? So he gets in the car, they're going to chase Joe down, really, and try and get her to just sign this paper. So as they're driving along, this is where we meet the rivalry. It was actually the first time that I ever heard the term Nightcrawler. And after seeing the movie Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, I put it all together. Now, granted, I haven't actually watched Twister in about 10 years, but watching it this time, I know this movie by heart, similar to Men in Black, Independence Day, Jurassic Park. So when Jonas shows up, played by Carrie Ullis, he goes, Jonas, son of a bitch. Well, listen to this part.
Jonas, son of a bitch.
Who is that, honey?
Jonas Miller, he's a nightcrawler. We all started out in the same lab that Jonas went out and got himself some corporate sponsors. He's in it for the money, not the science. He's got a lot of high-tech gadgets, but he's got no instincts.
I always forget Carrie Elwes is in this movie.
Yeah, he's got darker hair, and it really changes his look because he's a blonde dude.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so much focus on Bill and Joe that I many times forget so many other people in this movie. I never forget Philip Seymour Hoffman, but
No, you can't
everybody
forget
else
Dusty.
kind of falls to the wayside. And every time Carrie Elwes shows up, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, exactly. So after this little tussle with weather and finding out that Jonas is now on the same warpath as, you know, Joe and her team, we end up finding out that Jonas actually has a very similar contraption like Dorothy. Yeah, and Bill's like, you fucking asshole. You have. Oh, and oddly enough, this movie was going to be R-rated. They were going to make this an R-rated movie with far more profanity and far more grislier wounds that people experienced during some of the tornadoes and some of the intense weather. And this movie is rated PG-13 for depictions of very bad weather. I'll never forget that on the back of the VHS.
Perfect.
Depictions of very bad weather, PG-13 rating.
That might be a first as well.
I think it might be. But going back to the R-rated thing, apparently a lot of scenes with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Carrie Ullis are left on the cutting room floor because they were all so heavily profanity-laced. I want to see them.
Give us the R-rated cut, especially now that Philip Seymour Hoffman's no longer with us. Oh my God, them cussing at each other would be so fun.
Oh, hell yeah.
Damn it.
The scene where Bill goes after Jonas after he finds out that he's got this thing called .3 or whatever, because Bill's is called Dorothy. There's definitely that
such a weasel.
that rivalry. And I love this moment too.
What is the matter with you?
You stole my design, you son of a bitch!
Calm down. What the hell are you talking about?
Dorothy, you took her, you damn thief!
Oh, I get it. You want to take credit for my design, is
You're
that
a liar. She was our idea, and you know it.
Unrealized idea. Unrealized.
I think the reason why it's so easy to hate him is that we've all known a Jonas.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, too, because this came out right around the time Liar Liar came out. So we have Carrie Ullis in this role. And not that Jerry in Liar Liar is some slimy character, but he's the stepdad wannabe, you know, and like wants to like completely delete Fletcher out of the whole picture. And he is sweet, but at the same time, you're like, dude, you're fucking weird, man. So in Twister, when he is Jonas, but he plays a villain great.
Yes.
You know, like he's the only villain next to the weather in this movie.
Yes, exactly. So if you're going up against Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton and Philip Seymour Hoffman, you better be pretty good at being a just unscrupulous douchebag weasel in order to hold against them and hold your own in a movie playing the antagonist.
Absolutely. So, of course, Bill is now just, you know, a bit adrenaline fueled, and while he does have his fiance here, he still wants to beat Jonas to the punch. You know, like Dorothy was Bill's idea. He still has that drive before being a storm chaser, even though he's about to begin his new career as a weatherman, which a lot of people are kind of giving him shit for. So he decides to tell Joe that he'll give Joe and the team 1 day to get Dorothy off the ground, and if it doesn't work, he's gone. Only because now he just wants to fucking take Jonas down and be the first to get Dorothy up in the air with these sensors in there to get that technology to NSSL. Maybe he can still have his name as like the patented owner of Dorothy along with Joe and this team of storm chasers. And what we're treated to for the next like hour and 15 minutes is depictions of very bad weather and fantastic acting. And a great soundtrack, too. I mean, the songs in the movie are great.
God.
The soundtrack alone, the score is great. Cinematography is awesome. John DeBont actually had a bit of trouble with their first cinematographer, so he took over as cinematographer for a few weeks until they were able to hire another one. This movie took 82 days to shoot.
I guess I can see that, and I'm still so
It's
impressed.
a traveling movie.
That's true. And I can only imagine the setup shots when there's a lot of destruction, and then they're filming the cast around all of that destruction, how much those sets took to actually create and build, obviously.
Definitely.
But other than the satellite in the very first shot of this film and a couple of explosions, the CGI and the visual effects really held up. I haven't seen this movie in 10, 15 years either, because we were talking about this before we started recording. We both had watched this movie so many times during the 90s and early 2000s. We had to kind of take a break because we knew it so well, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so revisiting this movie 10, 15 years later, I was so impressed with the 1996 visual effects.
Oh, hell yeah. The tornadoes looked awesome. Some of them looked better than others. I mean, of course, we got Sisters moment when they're on the bridge and the cows come, the one cow comes flying through. And the whole, I love Melissa on the phone. She's like, I gotta go. We got cows. Like, I love that moment. That's like one of the best moments in Twister.
It really is. It's one of my favorite lines of the movie as well.
And then we get to meet Aunt Meg, who's played by Lois Smith. She is in so many things. Most notably for me, she is the creator of the precogs in Minority Report.
Hell yeah, me too.
Which I know is one of your picks because you stole that one from me too. That's such a great, great fucking movie. And a couple other people in this movie. Alan Ruck, most of you may not know him by name, but he is in one of the most beloved movies that I am not a fan of with Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's the friend that has the convertible that gets destroyed in that movie. Cameron, there you go. I guess I don't know. For whatever reason, I did not get into Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Well, I thought it was really cool when I was a kid, and then when I turned into my 20s and started watching it, I was like, God, this guy's an asshole.
Maybe that's what it was. I can't remember. I've actually had the pleasure of working with Alan Ruck on a very short-lived sitcom called Cooper Barrett's Guide to Surviving Life. It was a Fox show, and I'm very grateful to have been on that show because the first day of that project, I was able to be on the same lot as New Girl and right next door to the New Girl stage. So when Cooper Barrett ended, I walked over to New Girl and then spent the next 6 months with New Girl. So that was really fun.
Nice.
Yes, Todd Field, you may not know him by name. He is in this movie. He plays Belzer. He's the one that screams, "That's no moon, that's a space station!"
I love that line so much.
So good. He is the writer-director of Tar, the Cate Blanchett-led film that we discussed.
That's Todd.
That's Todd Field. Yeah, that's him.
That's cool.
Pretty awesome. Philip Seymour Hoffman, we know several movies. I loved him in Capote, loved him in Cold Mountain, love him in The Big Lebowski as Brant. I mean, just a wonderful career. Very, very sad when he ended up passing away.
I love Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain in Mission Impossible 3.
Oh, hell yes, absolutely. Oh, and there's another great movie with him and Ethan Hawke, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. Awesome movie.
Oh.
Yeah, he's really good in that movie. We have Bill Paxton in this movie, another rest in peace gentleman from this fantastic industry. V, you discussed him in Aliens when we did your pick of Aliens many, many episodes ago.
Game over, man. Game over.
He's also in True Lies, my pick from several episodes ago. James Cameron directed.
The one you stole from me, rightly so, because you worked with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Indeed. And speaking of Bill Paxton, in 2017, shortly after Bill Paxton's death, 200 storm chasers choreographed BP with their GPS tracker blips.
Oh.
Helen Hunt is the lead, one of the other leads in this movie. She actually gets top bill in this film, so it's Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton.
Nice.
Yeah, when the credits roll. So congratulations to Helen Hunt in that one. Mad About You, great sitcom, as good as it gets. Pretty good movie. She was in Pay It Forward with Kevin Spacey and Haley Joel Osment. So the cast is pretty stacked, especially for 1996. And Jean de Bont actually was very adamant about not having a lot of A-lister Hollywood stars in this movie because he didn't want to deal with any divas or any high-demanding type actors. So
awesome.
he was very adamant about that. He originally wanted Helen Hunt as Jo in this movie. The studio was really not sure about it because she really had only done Mad About You and some other bit parts here and there. But he was very much pushing for Helen Hunt. The studio did make him do auditions, and he did several auditions. I think I read that he did like 30 different auditions with a whole bunch of different actresses for the role of Jo. He said that they were very awkward auditions because at the end of every audition, he told that the actress that was auditioning that he wanted Helen Hunt instead of her.
Oh, that's kind of brutal.
A little bit, but you're the director, you know who you want, and
True.
sometimes it works out. And luckily, it worked out very well for this because I think Helen Hunt is great in this movie.
Oh, yeah, me too.
The high wind sequences were done with a jet engine from a Boeing 707 airplane.
Cool. I was wondering how they got those effects because when Jo and Bill especially are running through that cornfield, I'm like, how the hell did they make it so windy? I want to know.
Yeah, definitely. This was also one of the last movies that was mostly practical effects. Now, of course, there was some CGI in this movie, but Jean de Bont...
There aren't real twisters?
Unfortunately, no, they couldn't find real twisters to touch down when they wanted. It's like the moment in The Aviator where Howard Hughes wants clouds and there's no clouds anywhere, and then they find him like in Oakland and they got to fly to Oakland to get the clouds.
Exactly.
Jean de Bont took this movie because he was very excited about doing a mostly practical film because CGI he felt was going to start really taking over the film industry. And lo and behold, it took a little bit longer than 1996, but...
He was right.
He was absolutely right, yeah. So congrats to Jean de Bont. And not only was Jean de Bont one of the directors in consideration for the direction of this movie, there were some names that were thrown around the studio to direct this movie. Steven Spielberg. I mean, this is a Universal Warner Brothers collaboration,
yeah.
so why not Steven Spielberg? Robert Zemeckis was another one.
Makes sense.
Tim Burton was another one.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. John Carpenter.
If you wanted to make it a horror film, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. And going back to Spielberg being in consideration for this movie, Amblin Entertainment was another co-venture of this movie. And Bill Paxton actually did not meet Steven Spielberg until a year and a half after this movie came out. The first thing that Steven Spielberg said to Bill Paxton about Twister was, "Thanks for making me so much money." Because we're going to get into the numbers very soon, and I'm going to tell you right now, they're fucking big. Another actress that was in consideration for the role of Melissa before Jamie Gertz got the role was Mira Sorvino.
No, she'd be a good Jo, though.
I think she would have been a great Jo. The reason why Mira Sorvino did not want to do this movie, similar to Jack Black in Tropic Thunder, she did not want to dye her hair.
Oh, okay.
So Jamie Gertz got the role. Some other actors that were in consideration for Dusty, who ultimately went to Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I think absolutely killed it and is one of the best parts of this movie,
yes.
if not the best part of the movie.
Yes.
These two, truthfully, are out of the blue, shots in the dark. No idea why these two were even remotely considered. Garth Brooks. Maybe because he had the song Thunder Rolls at the time? I don't know. Kind of stupid, in my opinion. Nothing against you, Garth Brooks. I like some of your music, but I don't need to see you in a movie about tornadoes. This one just makes no fucking sense whatsoever. The guy never actually acts. He mostly plays himself. He's on Shark Tank.
Mark Cuban.
Mark fucking Cuban.
He's not an actor.
No, he's not an actor at all. It just doesn't make any sense, like how in 1996 he could be considered for a role like this.
He wasn't a billionaire at the time either.
I have no idea about anything other than Mark Cuban being in Entourage trying to buy the tequila company and being a basketball team owner and on Shark Tank. Other than that, I know nothing about him.
That's like David Schwimmer being considered for the role of Agent J in Men in Black. It just doesn't work.
Exactly. And you know what's funny about David Schwimmer? I was watching a clip from Band of Brothers the other day. I forgot he was in Band of Brothers.
Oh, God. Speaking of
he was
weasels.
the weakest part of Band of Brothers.
Yeah, but he's really easy to hate, which is pretty good acting.
The final actor that was in consideration and actually ultimately turned down the role of Dusty was Chris Farley. I could see it.
Yeah. The thing is that Philip Seymour Hoffman isn't goofy funny in the role.
Right.
He's more dirtbag smart funny and just really, really passionate about everything. And so Chris Farley always played the doofus, right? He was never smart in any of his films.
He was never like any other than, bodily humor and physical comedy.
Right. I could see it, though. I get it.
I totally could see it, yeah. It would be fun. Pseudo-universe, I'd watch that version.
The only piece of trivia that I ever knew about this film is that Philip Seymour Hoffman actually found his own wardrobe.
Oh, sweet.
For the character of Dusty, which I really appreciated because it's wacky as well.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I love the sunglasses, like they're the steampunk goggles.
And the poncho thing he's wearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another actor that was in consideration that actually read with the cast but decided that he was not a very good fit for the role, but suggested Bill Paxton because they worked together on Apollo 13 several years before, Tom fucking Hanks.
Oh my God. No.
I can't see Tom Hanks doing this movie.
I can't see him chasing storms.
Exactly. I can't either. And nothing against Tom Hanks. He's a great actor, but he's one of those actors like, oh, it's Tom Hanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't really mesh into a lot of characters. Although, I finally watched the trailer for Greyhound, which is a movie he wrote that's on Apple TV, and I got to watch that because it looks like a good movie.
It's not.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I'm just going to watch it anyway.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Now, this list of potential Bills is very fascinating. Before Bill Paxton and Tom Hanks, these 10 actors were in consideration from the studio and the director before Bill Paxton was ultimately cast. We discussed him last week in my pick for Braveheart. William Wallace, Mel Gibson, as Bill.
He's too aggressive.
I think he is too aggressive. Yeah. For whatever reason, I can't see this one. This actor, though, I could see, but I don't really like him very much because I don't like Dances with Wolves. Kevin Costner.
That I could totally see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because he dies in a tornado in Man of Steel.
That's right. He does. Yeah. He doesn't let Superboy take him away from the. That's right. Dennis Quaid is another one. I could see Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, totally.
Bill Paxton and Dennis Quaid kind of have like a same facial build. So it's just like deep fake Dennis Quaid on Bill Paxton's face. I could see it.
Well, all three of them have that Western vibe.
That's true, too. Exactly. This one, John Travolta.
No.
In the 90s. No, I don't know.
Stay with Phenomenon. No.
All right. This one, definitely not. He's too squinty, and I've never really been a big fan of his. Richard Gere.
He belongs in New York, not on the plains of Oklahoma.
Right. This guy, I don't think so. John Cusack.
He's not sciencey enough.
Yeah, exactly. This guy, I could probably see this actor. He's done almost everything at this point. He just played Dracula in Renfield, Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God. No.
No, you don't think so?
No.
I think this actor could have been good, but I think he's a little too rugged and intense. John McClane, Bruce Willis.
Okay, neither Nicolas Cage nor Bruce Willis are wholesome enough for Bill.
That's true. Very true. Very true. Yeah, I know the whole like sweetheart and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I could necessarily see Willis saying that.
Yeah.
This guy, I don't think so. Val Kilmer.
I could see it. I mean, think about The Saint came out the following year.
That's true. That's true.
Because he can play a scientist. Like, he's smart enough to portray that sciencey side, but he could be very comforting at the same time. I would pay to see that alternate universe.
Okay. All right. Kurt Russell was another one.
Hell yeah, especially if John Carpenter signed on.
Oh, yeah. That would have been sweet. That would have been badass.
Yeah.
And the final one, Batman, Michael Keaton.
Oh, I was like, Val Kilmer?
Well, two Batmans, actually.
You just talked about it.
That's right, yes. Two Batmans. Kilmer and Michael Keaton were in potentialities for the role of Bill.
If I had to choose a replacement, I would have picked Val Kilmer out of that whole list.
All right. I probably would have gone with Kevin Costner or Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
I could have had fun with those.
For sure. I think either of those would have been great, too. Again, another Western, though, because Val Kilmer played Doc Holliday. I mean, all of those guys
that's true.
you listed that we think would be a good fit were either in Wyatt Earp or Tombstone.
Or Maverick.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Now, this actor we have discussed I think one time only. We haven't done Happy Gilmore yet. We very likely will do Happy Gilmore in the future.
Bob
But this
Barker?
actor... No. No.
Okay.
This actor was in consideration for Jonas before Carrie Ullis was cast. Tappy Tibbins, Christopher McDonald.
Yes.
He would have been an
Oh.
awesome Jonas.
Excellent.
Yes. I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast.
Exactly.
He could have said that to Bill. That would have been
Yeah.
hilarious.
Oh, that would have been so good. Yes.
Now this movie began shooting on May 1st of 1995. In April of 1995, April 19th to be exact, there was the Oklahoma City bombing, and production was very close to the location. So production shut down while majority of the crew went to help out with rescue efforts. So
Oh, wow.
hats off to the crew of Twister for jumping in to that whole madness.
Yeah.
And I will never forget when that happened.
Wow.
Yes, that was pretty wild. Now, last piece of trivia before I get into the highest grossing films of 1996, the tornado sound effects, the low hums and everything like that, was the slowed down moan of a camel. And if you've
Sweet.
ever heard a camel do its whole like thing, that's just slowed down, and that's how we get the Twister sound effects. So thank you for all of that, sound department. And that garnered you an Oscar nomination for Best Sound for Twister.
It should have. Those sounds are awesome, and they had to create them from scratch.
Yes. It was also nominated for an Oscar for Best Visual Effects as well. It did not win any of those two nominations, but it was still nominated. So congratulations to those two teams for Twister.
That's a bummer, but the nominations were completely deserved.
Absolutely. Twister was released on May 10th of 1996. I believe I saw it the second week that it came out in theaters. My family and I were at the mall, and my dad was like, "Are we going to go see a movie this weekend?" And I was like, "Of course." And we went and saw Twister, so that was pretty awesome. This film had a budget. V, what do you think the budget was? 1996, Twister, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, John DeBont. Again, they were not all A-listers at the time.
They weren't, which is why I'm thinking it's actually lower, like 60 to 80 million bucks.
Nope, you're wrong. It was $92 million.
Oh, a little higher than I thought.
Yes, the domestic box office. V, take a guess. What do you think the domestic box office of Twister was?
I think it's close to 300 million bucks.
You are about 61 million off. It was $241.8 million domestic box office.
Okay.
Worldwide box office, $494.5 million.
Holy shit, our worldwide box offices are nearly identical this week, even though the
Yeah.
movies were released so far apart. That's awesome.
That is pretty badass. Oh, and also this movie is on the top 400 AFI list of the most heart-pounding American movies.
Yeah, totally agree.
Now, we'll get into the highest grossings of 1996. V, what was the highest grossing film of 1996? Will Smith.
I was going to say, isn't it one of your all-time favorite movies?
It is indeed.
Independence Day.
It is Independence Day, ID4, Hells yeah.
Starring the other Bill.
Pullman Bill, indeed. The third highest grossing film was Mission Impossible. The fourth highest
Yes.
grossing film, The Rock. Number 5, Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy. Number 6, another Mel Gibson movie, Ransom with Rene Russo.
Ooh, yeah, directed by Ron Howard.
The seventh highest grossing film, Birdcage. Number 8, A Time to Kill. Number 9, the live-action version of 101 Dalmatians. Number 10, First Wives Club. Number 11, Eraser. Number 12, Phenomenon. Number 13, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Number 14, a future pick of mine, Star Trek First Contact.
Shit, this is a good year.
Yeah, and we're not even done yet. Number 15, a movie that How Did This Get Made hates, but I love, Space Jam with Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes.
Never saw it.
Oh, number 16, Richard Dreyfuss in Mr. Holland's Opus.
Aw.
Number 17, Broken Arrow. Number 22, a pick of mine from the past, 12 Monkeys. Number 25, another pick of mine from the past, Jingle All the Way. Number 28, another pick of mine from the past, Dragonheart. Number 30, Jumanji. 32, Toy Story. 33, Beavis and Butthead Do America. We did reference that. Well, speaking of your movie... Number 34, highest grossing movie, another pick of mine from 1996, Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes, John Leguizamo, and Harold Perrineau in Romeo and Juliet. Number 45, Muppet Treasure Island, starring the Fantastic Muppets and Tim Curry. Number 55, Steve Martin, Martin Short, Diane Keaton in Father of the Bride Part 2, another fantastic sequel. Number 58, via pick of yours from the past, James and the Giant Peach. Number 60, a Tim Burton classic with Jack Nicholson, Sarah Jessica Parker, Pierce Brosnan, Mars Attacks. Number 65, a Sinbad film that I saw in theaters, and I think one other time other than that, First Kid.
Oh, I was thinking House
Not the one you were thinking of.
Damn it.
Oh, no, not that one.
With Phil Hartman. God, that movie's so funny.
That is a good one. Number 68, Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, George Clooney and Salma Hayek in From Dusk Till Dawn.
I just rewatched that film a couple weeks ago with my sister, and it's still fun.
Oh, hell yeah. It's a badass flick. Number 73, The Craft. Number 74, another Nev Campbell film, your favorite slasher film, Scream.
It is my favorite.
Yeah. Number 75, the Coen brothers, Frances McDormand, John Carroll, Steve Buscemi, and Peter Stormare in Fargo.
So dark.
It is. Number 95, the Shaquille O'Neal masterpiece, Kazam.
I only know of Shazam starring Sinbad. I don't know what you're talking about.
It does not exist. It does not exist. And the second highest grossing film of 1996. My pick for this week, Twister, everybody.
Shit, second highest. That's awesome.
Hell yeah. So that is Twister, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's so great. It still holds up. Check it out if you would like to. If you have not yet, you can rent it on Apple. Amazon, unfortunately, is not available for free, but do check it out if you'd like. It is a blast.
I had so much fun revisiting this movie after all these years.
Hell yeah, so did I.
Oh, and we didn't mention it, but you and I were introduced to The Shining in this movie.
That's right, yes. There was a piece of trivia that I did leave out, but now that you brought that up, I will just let you know and our audience know. There was a tornado that touched down right outside of a drive-in movie theater that planned on showing Twister one night, and they ended up canceling because the tornado was on its way.
That sucks.
Talk about foreshadowing.
Yeah, right? Whoa, these effects seem so real.
That would have been wild.
That's a 4DX theater right there.
Hell yes, it is. Absolutely. So, V, I'm curious, would you watch San Andreas with your grandmother?
Yeah, I don't think she'd like it, but it's actually kind of a family-friendly movie because it's a family trying to save each other, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It's a PG-13 movie. I mean, there's a couple of cuss words, and there's some bloodiness when people get injured, but nothing overly gory.
Right.
I certainly would watch this with my older teenage niece without a problem. And would you watch Twister with your grandma?
Oh, I did many, many times.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
Again, not very gory. PG-13.
No. Yeah.
Couple of cuss
depictions
words.
of bad weather. Yeah,
exactly. God, that will be my all-time favorite rating forever.
Oh, yeah. It's magnificent.
That and Intense Peril are my two favorite wordings for ratings.
Sweet. Well, that was a very, very fun episode. Forces of nature. Do be careful out there. You never know when the Earth's going to talk to us. Well, thank you guys very much for joining us here for episode 98 at Movies You Miss Podcast. Please do rate, review, subscribe, follow us on all social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all the good stuff. And please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, because if you do, you get to be thrown into the hat for the next reviewer-requested episode, which will be coming at you in just a few months.
Yes, those are so fun for us, and we love communicating with you and discussing your top 5 movies that you like to recommend.
Hell yeah. And as always, everybody, we like to close out Movies You Miss Podcast with film as a form of art. And in art, all opinions are valid, except if you think
disaster movies have to be based on scientific fact.
Oh, I love it.
I love disaster movies, and I'm only slowly realizing that with revisiting this episode and discussing other disaster movies over the last couple of weeks. Those and time travel movies are two subgenres that I've discovered while doing this podcast that I really do love.
Oh, yeah. I've always liked disaster movies, and time travel movies I've always been a fan of. I can't wait to get into another time travel type movie on this podcast in the future.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. So with that, everybody, stay safe out there. We will see you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.